Well, hello, this is Dr. Chris Lemmon, and this is my chat for August. So, once again, this year I just been talking about how I came to become aware of various different things that eventually integrated into my education and into my skill sets as a teacher, which I finally retired from. I'm now, this August will be another birthday, so I'm tracking into 82nd year. Um, and I'm not trying to make a big deal out of that, but I never expected to live that long. When I was a little kid, I can remember the doctor who used to come to the house talking to my grandmother and saying, "Well, the kid's not very healthy, but he'll probably still make it to 40." So that's like, um, and I used to sit there and think, well, 40 is not bad, when you're four, like 40 seems like, yeah, it's a long ways. I'm good, no big deal. Um, I didn't sleep very much. I had a huge reaction I talked about before with pneumonia. Also in the summertime, I had a huge reaction to the sun. I would get out and play. Like one time we went to a beach, and I was out there for 10 minutes and wound up going to the hospital for sun poisoning. So if I went out to play, I had long sleeve shirts on, I had a hat on, I had a thing around my neck, which was horrible. It was hot and humid. So none of that was much fun to work with. So I didn't go out and play very much. I was on my own. Some of the skill sets that I noticed that I had picked up is that were unusual because I did have a couple of cousins that would come by and stay for 2 or 3 days when their parents went on a trip. So I had other kids around now and then, and we'd be in a basement, and they operated differently than I did. Um, and I would, I could set my toys out in a basement and leave them. I could play a game. I could have, like anyone could do. When you learn a game, you remember the rules for the game, and then that's how you put it all together, right? But I didn't realize because I'd made the game up and structured it that I was just doing something that other kids do. They learn the rules, right? But I didn't have that term. So I just had a game that I could set up for and come back to. That was all just an imagined piece, right? Like I said before, I could see the images. So I could see the image, I could track it by an image, which later led me to concepts and symbols. But what I did notice is that, and I didn't notice it until I got into first grade, really until second grade. First grade, I was just in a state of alarm because everybody knew more than I did. They knew how to do things right. They knew what that meant. They knew, yeah, I really no social skills at all from interacting with kids. So in second grade, I started looking around. What I'd noticed with my cousins when they'd come over, they would all of a sudden kind of get into a little state change would be the official term, right? So a state is usually referred to something as irreducible in the world of philosophy and psychology. In other words, states would then have components in it, moods, temperaments, all those would be subsets of a state. Of course, none of that did I know. But what I did watch is that my cousins would all of a sudden go into a memory or an idea, or they kind of drift off, daydreaming, we might call it, whatever. And then when they came back in, they would actually act a little differently, and the image would change above them. It's almost as if they were tracking something else now all of a sudden. So I'd observed those things. By the time I was in second grade, we would be outside playing, and once again, even in school, had to wear a hat outside. I had to, uh, and because of sun. And here I am on the playground, and on really hot days, they wouldn't even let me out on the playground because they had me sit in a room because of my exposure to sun. I'm out playing with kids, and all of a sudden they would shift. They're tired of that game, and they would switch, and they'd start to search for a different game. Or they lost, and they weren't happy, or whatever's going on. I would start to see that shift. I didn't say anything. I would just start to observe that. Then I started to ask people, "Did you notice that?" And they go, eh. They didn't have a concern. They didn't care at all. So I just used it as kind of like my little awareness thing. My mother would come home and, she was working. My father had died when I was two, so she was working in a shoe factory. And here she is, because it's during the war. So here she is making a press. cutting out leather goods for shoes, Hanover Shoe Company. But on the same machine next to her is a man doing it. He's getting paid twice the wage per hour, and he gets to work 6 days a week, and she can only work five. So that would be to some degree a little bit of a frustration because he's doing the same work but making less money. That's kind of the way it was in those days. And and I would hear her sometimes make comments about some of the frustrations that she was going through. And then some days she'd come home, she'd be just delighted or happy, or she would have some little trip planned. She'd like to go. I mean, she was 20 some years old. She'd like to go out with her girlfriends on the weekends and go somewhere and go down the river and go swimming or whatever, and hopefully not drag me along and leave me with grandma. Um, and that was kind of because once again she'd have to keep me locked up in a tent or in a car. I couldn't be out in the sun. It was like, yeah. So I was pretty much at grandma's all the time, down in my basement. But I noticed those shifts. I could see them. And then I started wondering if I could alter them, if I could change them, if I could fix that. Um, my cousin was really good, the female cousin, she was really good at getting into kind of a daydream. She would kind of drift a little bit. And so I would look at that. And then I'd start a conversation along the lines of what her image was. She would join in the conversation as if both of us watching a movie. And all of a sudden we're both seeing the same thing at the time. But she would never, she would never catch the idea that I just kind of tuned into her. It's like, wow. Now today, we talk about, yeah, better communication skills, blah, blah, blah. But come on, I was 5 years old. And I was just noticing, it's like, wow, that's really very interesting. I walked out of childhood being able to, if I go to sleep and I start having a dream, I go, this dream's not going anywhere. I'll just switch and bring a different dream in. Or I'll bring in a symbol in and track. Or I'll maybe have a project I'm working on and I'm thinking, okay, I have some questions on this project. So in the middle of the dream, I will go through some sequences of questions. Then the next day, somewhere, not usually first thing in the morning, but somewhere I'll be a pause and all of a sudden it's gone like, oh, I can feel that answer coming in. It's like, yes, I did have a question. All of a sudden it's like, I find that little track piece. This is something that everybody goes through. It's a normal thing, right? But for me, it was like, because I didn't grow up with the kids, I didn't realize this is like normal. And because by the time I'm there, when I see someone doing this, I would just be quiet and watch. I didn't interfere. I just wanted to see where it went. I wanted to see where we could take it. What could we do with this? That was my whole game. And I went hiking in the woods during the summertime with a hat on and long sleeve shirt. But I liked the woods because it was cool. So it was like not hot, even though it was hot out. So I was comfortable with my shirt and my hat on and my scarf, a little really light scarf around my neck so my sun neck wouldn't get burnt. Gosh, it was like, um, and tie up shoes always, so heaven forbid his son got in. And of course, I was, white like a piece of, typing paper, and my hair was totally white too. Um, but I'd go out with other kids and they would get to a place all of a sudden it was out of the comfort zone and they would get frightened. And we're walking along, all of a sudden I could feel that. I could turn around and they're looking around. It's like, I've been out here before. There's nothing that's going to get you, And they're looking at me and they're kind of like, oh, I think I better go back. And I said, okay, do you know your way back? And they go, I think so. I said, well, go ahead and yell if you get lost. I'm going to go wander some more. And so eventually I got to the point where it's just like very, very rare did I ever take anybody on my adventures because they would time out is what I used to call it. It's like all of a sudden they would lose that spirit of adventure and find the spirit of fear. And I could feel that transition. Yeah. Um, and and then later on, all the way through, especially I was never involved very much in sporting events. I never wanted to go learn football. I never wanted to do any of that because, once again, I didn't have a background and I didn't have that idea of that competitive spirit. Oh, I want to win or else. And it's like, no, I would just see that change and I just observe it. I go, wow, what's in it for them? I mean, you go run a race and you win. Well, what does that mean, right? Then tomorrow you got to win again. I just I couldn't fathom that whole interchange at all growing up. So people would say, you want to play sports, you want to do something. It's like, no, no. Matter of fact, I never got involved with any sports to speak of. Oh, maybe we play tag or hide and seek, those kind of kid games. And when we worked our way out of the kid games, then I really just like, yeah, with my friends, we'd go build forts. That was the only game I probably got involved in was building forts, building hideouts, like somewhere in a field, like that was pretty much it. Just imagination games, but never interactive physical games. So by the time I got into high school, it was that whole interactive physical thing was like, oh yeah, I went out for football. I think just because my stepfather told stories about when he was in high school playing football and all, how great it was. And I thought, well, I'll go out for football. Um, but the truth be told is like everyone I was tall, and I could run, but pretty much everybody was beefier than I was, and all these kids had played football and been playing football. I didn't even know what it was shaped like. And when they hand me a football and they're trying to teach me how to throw it, I've never thrown one. It's like I'm a freshman in high school. It's like wow. So I didn't stay in football very long. The coach found some utilization of me for a few things, mostly to take out people on the other side of the team. But other than that, no, it's like, and so I pulled all the way out of that um, whole thing. I did a little bit of, I wanted to think, well, I like being in the woods. Maybe I'll try a distance running. But I found that I didn't really have the lungs at that time for distance running. I was pretty much 100-yard dash, 220. I could do those. So I was pretty much playing with running short distances. And that's pretty much the only thing I did all the way through high school. We did a little field sports, whatever, but really not much of anything. Um, so by the time I got into college, I had absolutely no interest. I don't think I've ever watched a game. I mean, I came into life with no television. So by the time television came around, I never owned one in my life. So I never desired to have a television. I never sat down and watched a show. I never watched I, I would go maybe to some of my high school sporting events to go with a couple of friends that weren't on the team, and we would go and watch for a little while. But I usually was the first one to leave. It was just totally boring to me. So just not my interest. But it was interesting to watch what I'm watching the people and how the people get into sync and get enthused and get excited. And there's a play all of a sudden, which I don't even know what the play was, but then they're all excited and they're all jumping around. And I'm watching all these shifts and I'm watching the patterns change. And I'm going like, wow, I must be totally crazy, right? It's like, whatever. Um, but I liked assembling things. I like building things. So I got an idea of going into that. I think I said before, and when I went into college, I went into electronic engineering. I kind of like the idea of working more with like electronics and small parts rather than say construction or auto repair or something along those lines. And so I got into that, was in that for a relatively short period of time, and found that I really didn't. I was around some other engineers, and I find now that's not who I want to become. So then I switched, took a bunch of tests, and they felt I should go into medicine, and I kind of or teaching. Uh, so anyway, I wound up going into psychology. Um, to me, then all of a sudden I started seeing these temperaments and states, and it's like, wow, I could then look at someone that I'm talking to or counseling, and I could see them start to shift. I can do that. Well, then at the time, I spent a lot of time behind mirrors looking at kids and writing reports on them. And I could watch kids when they start to shift, and I can like, wow. And then I would watch a kid that would step out of a group. They were all playing on the floor, maybe jacks or something, and then he would step back and he would be in some type of a fantasy and I'd be looking at those, and then I would go in to him and sit down and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And he's looking at me and I said, let's go back to the idea you had. What was that? What was that character? I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So we'd have a dialogue about his fantasy. And sometimes there'd be emotional charges in his fantasy, things he was afraid of, things he was stimulated about. I was just learning about these unconscious and subconscious patterns. It was fascinating that I could see them and kind of play with them. And like, wow, this is really interesting. I had no idea exactly what I was going to do with all that, but it was kind of fun working. Uh, and I remember when I first started doing some counseling, I didn't wind up getting a counseling license. I just really kind of wanted to take my education and go into something different. I really wanted to work with children at first, and that didn't work out the way I planned. So then I decided to go into criminology because I thought that would be interesting. And so for that, I didn't need a clinical license. But I did wind up doing a lot of counseling for the most part. Usually, some church organization would be looking for counselors. I would volunteer. They would pay me a few dollars for every party I counsel. We were doing mostly marriage counseling, and some kids would be frustrated. And we run into some sexual abuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was pretty good at spotting all those things because I could see those states that got triggered and could kind of get a feel for what was going on with them. Just looking at the image. I do remember I had a woman that came in and she was in her late 20s. She was actually a very attractive looking lady in my mind, 28 years old. And she came in and she was very depressed. And she told me, I don't know what to do. Um, I'm physically fit. I'm healthy. I go do exercises. I'm an attractive looking woman. I'm in good shape. I have nice clothes. I don't smell or anything. It's like, wow, I should take baths. And she says, I meet up guys ask me out, and it's like one date or two dates, and I don't ever see them again. It's like, and even if I see them around school, it's just kind of like they just drift away with me. So I'm trying to figure out. Now I'm getting to like 20, my late 20s, and everybody in my family says, "Why aren't you married yet? Right? You don't have a steady boyfriend. What's going on?" Right? It's like, and everybody's hinting about, well, maybe your sex life, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's just like, I don't have a problem. I said I can find someone to go have sex with them, but that's not a problem. But they still don't come back. They still don't respond. It's like, what is that? And so I'm sitting there listening to her story, kind of like, wow, what's going on? And she's tracking the story. And I said, so just relax for a moment. Just relax. This- Now you're in the middle of a tale. And what we want to do is we want to go back to where the story started. Before the story started, we want to find out what happened before it that made it happen, that made it come about. So giving me all the details about your condition doesn't help me find out what caused it. So we're sitting there relaxing. It's just relax and just kind of go back into your childhood. And she said, well, my childhood was kind of fun because my dad was in the service. So I grew up in Japan. And I said, oh, that's kind of cool. And then all of a sudden, I see behind her this like 8 foot giant, weird looking creature, kind of like a green, but not like a monster, like a friendly monster, like a little kid's monster. And I'm seeing this thing and I go, oh my God. So I said to her, let me describe something to you. And I start describing this thing that I have an image for. And she looks at me and she had a name for it. And apparently, in Japan, when she was a little kid growing up in there, why her mother would get her little kids' books. They were in Japanese, so she couldn't read the words, but she was young. It didn't really read anyhow, so she was just looking at picture books. She was maybe 4 years old, whatever. Um, but when she would go to the playground and play, there was a little bit of racism that would come into play because she was a white kid and the Japanese kids were out there and they would kind of push her away because she was different. It's like, whatever, kids. Once she got to know them and got a little older, why, when she was really young, that's not a problem. And she went to a little stage, it was. And then when she got a little older, some of them befriended her and some of them were still isolated. And that's what she remembered about the elements of it. She did remember that when they were pushing her away when they were all of a sudden upset with her being different. Why, her mother got her a book, and the book was about a little girl who made a friend who was a big monster. And that way, if anybody threatened you or intimidated you, the monster would take care of them. That was a security piece, right? And and a mother bought her that book, and she used to read that book all the time. She imagined that monster, totally, absolutely imagined that monster when she was around the kids. And of course, the kids then all of a sudden would feel that force back. So rather than try to one up it, they would just kind of relax and say, oh, well, maybe she is all right. So all of a sudden, she made friends with the kids. They were like, all of a sudden, had a respect because she had this authority or power that oozed through her. So there she was making friends. And then all the way, rest of her time, maybe first or second grade, till they got out of Japan, why she got along with everybody and not a problem because of this. So I'm going like, wow, this is very interesting. I don't know if this is true, hon, but what if you're out on a date and all of a sudden this critter appears? The guy you're dating probably would not have an idea or see it, but it would have an influence because it's big. and and that could have an effect on them. They would never remember it, but they would most certainly stay their distance from you and and then you know, be a little bit alarmed until they got to know you a little better. And obviously, they never got to know you well enough. Now you have friends that you hang out with that are just friends, boys and girls that you go to school with, and they don't have a problem with you, right? And she says, no, that's what's weird. I mean, I know guys, but they're dating other girls. So, we're not dating, but we're friends. We hang out together. I said, so I think I just for kicks, why don't I do this? Why don't I take that giant and remove him? And she's looking at me and said, piece of cake, not a problem. Come on, it's a childhood fantasy, so it's not a problem. So I'm just going to make a symbol over here of a book. This is a kind of a turquoise green book. And I'm going to take him and I'm going to put him in the book, which is where he belongs. And we'll just close the book. And so he's in the book. If you ever need him again, you just look for the green book and then invoke him. But other than that, he's gone. Uh, so I said, now I want to take 2 weeks and see you in 2 weeks and see what happened. I saw her in 2 weeks when she came in and she said, oh my gosh, she has met someone that's already taken her to lunch, has taken her out once. He's just totally fascinated with her. It's like, it's amazing. And then I'm walking around thinking this is really starting to work. I found someone that likes me and all of it. And then I got other guys that are starting to talk to me. And next thing I know, I feel like I'm getting all this attention. And now I'm really confused. It's like this guy that's asked me up a couple times, do I do I consider that a relationship? Or I said, no, you don't consider that a relationship at your age, where you're at right now. You want to really look around, go out with a couple of people, talk with different people, get a range for you can understand how people think, how they operate, where their value system are. Look for deeper context into someone because you're searching for someone that you want to have a relationship with, and just because they're nice to you doesn't mean anything. You have to look at, say, why do I need to be nice to them? What's going on? What's their values? Open up dialogues, have discussions. You need to bring up issues about the world and their view on it, see what they think. I felt like a dating coach, for heaven's sakes. But that was the last time I saw her. Not a problem. It was 2 years later that I actually got an invitation to her wedding. So I think that 2 years she shuffled around and dated enough people where she finally had found someone she wanted to settle down to. So I remember in the invitation of the wedding, she said, "I'm I'm making this wedding 2 days before my birthday because I wanted to be married before I turned 30." With a cute little note that she put in it for me. But she most certainly did. And I don't know where it went from there. It was just kind of interesting. So it's just state changes are a really intriguing thing. We usually think of them as mood changes. We usually think of it's just like our attention shift to something. Um, if we don't notice those shifts, then we totally forget whatever we're working on. We get distracted. That's span of attention, right? And so the span of attention is used to be a minute and a half. I think I've mentioned before in those videos that to fire an unconscious pattern takes 3 seconds, much, much faster than you can think. And then to end it, to have it relinquished, takes about 90 seconds. So if you get caught into it and you have a reaction to whatever lights up in that 90 seconds, then it's running you. And that's called a reaction, right? It's running you and you're in reaction to it. So it's not like there's a demon or a ghost or some whatever. That was her way of being able to label. Remember, I said I was a person that labeled things with images and later symbols. And I see other people do the same thing. They're just not aware of it. So she labeled, I need to be protected to anybody that might be threatening with this character. And and it became totally unconscious. So whatever that got communicated in some way, shape, or form, we actually interact a lot more than we're conscious of. We really do. We interact with people's thoughts, with ideas. There's tons of research on that, and you can find out all over the internet. Like they can seed a group. They can have one person sitting in a group, seating, and they're having, it's kind of like the good witch, the bad witch scenario. They're sitting there looking at a book and they're thinking a certain thought, and everybody in that room gets affected by it. And they take that same testing sequence without someone seeing the room, the outcome is totally different. So we influence people by being in their presence, by interacting them. The more we can converse with them and bring it into a dialogue to where we're bringing it into conscious, then we can then make conscious evaluations and decisions about the person, where we want to go. That's why salespeople have scenarios that they've learned, right? As they don't want to show too much of who they are. They want to keep turning your attention around to whatever they're selling, you know? So it's like they maneuver these with these. I worked for a multitude of companies and worked in an HR department. And I had to sit down and teach people all these lines about, you want to bring the customer's attention back to the product you're selling them. You want to bring the customer's attention. If they're a couple, you want them to go ahead and speak it, but you want to find his value for it and her value for it. And you want to support both and say, this isn't amazing. You both get the value you want out of this. You're not even going down the list of all the things they don't want, right? And so you're picking and choosing. I was a really good salesman. I would see all those images. I could put all this package together. What I see over and over again as a teacher when I was teaching classes, and we would teach intuitive, people would see these pictures. It would take a little while to get separation to be able to say, oh, this is your idea. This is your experience. I have an experience associated with a tree that is about sitting under a tree, relaxing. You have an experience with a picture for a tree where you fell out of one. It's a total different experience, but the symbol is the same, more or less. It's like, wow. So when I see a symbol, I don't assume that it's my story. I have to then ask you some questions. Wow, I'm looking at you here as a kid. Did you play in trees a lot as a kid? And then a whole story would unfold. And I go, oh, well, you came in because you told me you're apprehensive and you're fearful of doing things, going out hikes in new places, always new endeavors. What we need to do is take a look at like maybe that fear started way back from that you were having fun climbing in that tree, you got up too high, you fell down, you hurt yourself, and then you became frightened of being able to take that adventure. So what we need to do is we need to stage you with small adventures. I'm going to give you some assignments that I want you to go out. I want you to go and do a few things that are kind of weird. I want you to go up and ask somebody something. I'll give you some questions. You go ask someone, right? Go up to a police officer and ask him a question and give him a little scenario. We don't make it criminal. It's just like you're lost or you're confused about something or you want to find out why things are. Act like you're curious, but go ahead and take that step. So I staged her with some of those questions or assignments to do, and all of a sudden they start to open up. They start to come separated from that fear. They can start to say, wow, I can now go past that apprehension. I can now venture into what was unknown. And it just takes a little bit of time. So it's just kind of fun, right? So I got to apply some of the things that I bumped into as a kid and got to observe. It had an influence on me. I most certainly acted differently than the other kids around me. Um, I didn't play or do things exactly like they did, but I engaged. It's not like I was indifferent. I had friends, but just simply my whole genre of it was totally different, right? Um, and so I just shuffled around. Uh, very different. So I wasn't sports driven. I wound up having a lot of friends that weren't driven, but we hung out, we did things, we played a lot of games, we read a lot of books, and we went on a lot of adventures. Most certainly, my driving force in life was adventures. And now I look back and I think about the friends I have today when I hear from any of them why they're most certainly still adventurers. They're still going out and hiking in places or going on trips in the world to different places. Um, and I have this year I've been to New Zealand. We've got a trip planned to Egypt. We've got another one to Germany. So pretty much I'm still the adventurer. I'd much rather go do that than go to any sporting event or to go to even Fourth of July fireworks show. It's like, no, it's just like I'd rather go to hike in the woods somewhere. So this is how you put together the idea of who you are. You get to know how you operate. If you pay a lot of attention to how you operate, you start to become aware of how it feels when that shuffle comes in. All of a sudden, it's strangeness. For me in the beginning, it was like all of a sudden I lost the memory. I just like all of a sudden I'm doing this and now I'm distracted doing that. You see it with kids all the time. They're playing with this toy and then they're playing with that one. Then someone else has got another toy and they go over there and join with them. It's like boom, boom, boom. The span is really small. You want to build that span. So when you're doing something and you get distracted, you go, okay, I'll come back to this. So make a marker there. Look at that and say, here's where I let go. Put up a symbol. This is where I stopped. I'll put it aside. Now I'll go do this. So that way I can come back to it. I even go so far as to put those things on schedule. Right. So today was a day where I had a scheduled job. So I got up today and I went on and I did my scheduled task. I put a symbol on them. So, so my neighbor lady's got a problem with blackberries. I got a sprayer. So I went over today. I was waiting for post rain. We had rain last weekend. I wait 2 or 3 days, and now I go over and I sprayed our blackberry bushes so that the blackberries. She has a type of blackberry that doesn't produce berries; it just produces thorns. It's just really aggressive, and so I don't want it coming into my yard. So I go ahead and buy the chemical. I go over and I spray it. And so she's a little apprehensive about spraying them, but I'm a little apprehensive about tearing my whole deck apart and repairing it. So anyway, so we have a mutual agreement. We have an equalized goal. It's like, yes, I want the blackberries to go away, and she wants them to go away. So that helps out. Does that make sense? That's the spirit of communication. It's what we're trying to learn when we interact with people. It's like, how do you get to value? How do I get to value? How can we come to terms on that? What's important to you? What's important to me? And do we ever need to talk again? Or not? All right. And maybe it's just like so many people I help and I say, okay, I help you. Let me know if you got another problem. Let me know if something else breaks. I got a lot of people in the neighborhood that call me when something breaks because like there's the advantage of living 80 years on this planet is you learn to do a lot of things, right? And I'm never really good at any of those things because I never was in any of the mechanical fields. Come on, I was a psychologist. I was never in any of those kind of fields, but I always had to fix things. I always had repairs done. We were back to where we used to tune up our cars. We used to, I had a couple of sports cars. We had to balance the carburetors. We had to, all those things were just kind of fun things that you learn to do. I got tons and tons of tools that are antiquated. And my wife says, well, when you die, I'm just going to sell your tools. And I said, I don't think anybody's going to want to buy them. there's no use for those. Like nobody's going to rebuild a carburetor anymore. Those days are gone. So all this stuff is in a flow. It's developing, and I want you to know that as things develop, and it's always in a state of change, pay attention to those triggers of change. Pay attention for those invitations for you to think differently about something. It's coming out of your unconscious, but it means it is time for it. So pay attention. Look around at that. Say, wow, that's kind of interesting. Don't get scared. Pay attention. What's it telling you? Take a little meditation. Just relax your body. Just close your eyes and imagine you're just watching the world go by and then ask questions. Right? Why did I see this? Why did that happen? What was going on? And you start to get more questions back usually. It's like, and so that gets you to delve into it. Unknown is always a series of questions, one question after another. In the unknown, we can't tell you something that would allow you to know because by definition, it's unknown. So all you get out of an unknown is better questions. As you stage the questions, then our ability to logically deduce this is associated with this is associated with this is associated. And we start to build a platform where all of a sudden we go, oh, I got it. This is what that means. I didn't know that, but now I just learned it. That's the process, the unknown. That's the process of growth, spiritual growth, most certainly learning how to be a good citizen, a good neighbor, a good friend, and a good partner. Okay. So, on that note, thank you very much. It's been fun. If you have any questions, once again, send me an email, chris@wizardscatch.com. I'd be glad to answer your questions. I'll reply to your emails. That's the only way you can get hold of me, uh, other than driving to my house. Uh, and and so I would love to hear from you and any questions that you might have. So thank you very much, and have a nice August.